Just listening to Walden on books on tape is not a very thorough way to read Thoreau. So we're doing a more thorough read of Thoreau by reading him ourselves. And we're coming to the part about me, which is brute neighbors. Because we read in the prior reading that I had a reptilian mind, as I could identify with the brute part of people. Brute neighbors. We come after higher laws, we come in Walden to brute neighbors. Sometimes I had a companion in my fishing who came through the village to my house from the other side of town, and the catching of the dinner was as much a social exercise as the eating of it. Hermit. I wonder what the world is doing now. I have not heard so much as a locust over the sweet fern these 3 hours. The pigeons are all asleep upon their roost, no flutter from them. Was that a farmer's noon horn which sounded from beyond the woods just now? The hands are coming in to boiled salt beef and cider and Indian bread. Why will men worry themselves so? He that does not eat need not work. I wonder how much they have reaped. Who would live there where a body can never think about for the barking of bows? And housekeeping, to keep bright the devil's doorknobs and score his tubs this bright day. Better not keep a house, say some hollow tree, and then for morning calls and dinner parties. Only a woodpecker tapping. Oh, they swarm. The sun is too warm there. They are born too far into life for me. I have water from the spring and a loaf of brown bread on the shelf. Hark, I hear a rustling of the leaves. Is he doing stream of consciousness journaling? It is some ill-fed village hound yielding to the instinct of the chase, or the lost pig which is said to be in these woods, and whose tracks I saw after the rain. It comes on apace, my sumacs and sweetbriars tremble. Eh, Mr. Poet, is it you? Do you think that they came up to him and say, "Hey, Mr. Poet, is it you?" Would they ever come up and say, "Are you the poet?" Remember when your therapist said that I was a philosopher? How do you like the world today, poet? So that section was hermit. Now it's poet. See those clouds, how they hang. That's the greatest thing I have seen today. There's nothing like it in old paintings, nothing like it in foreign lands. Unless when we were off the coast of Spain. That's a true Mediterranean sky. But how would he know what a Mediterranean sky looks like? I thought, as I have my living to get, I have not eaten today, that I might go a-fishing. That's the true industry for poets. It is the only trade I have learned. Come, what's along? Did you go fishing much back in Greece? You didn't fish? You weren't on the water? Did you eat fish? Hermit. I don't know what this dialogue is. He says hermit, poet, hermit alone. There's some sort of dialogue. Hermit says, I cannot resist. My brown bread will soon be gone. I will go with you gladly soon, but I am just concluding a serious meditation. So, what were we talking about? How people have different eyes and different selves, and Gurdjieff, and Now he has one personality that's a hermit and one that's a poet. He hasn't even talked about his neighbors. Concluding a serious meditation, I think that I am near the end of it. Leave me alone then for a while, but that we may not be delayed. You shall be digging the bait meanwhile. Angleworms are rarely to be met with in these parts where the soil was never fattened with manure. The race is nearly extinct. The sport of digging in the bait is nearly equal to that of catching the fish. When we used to go fishing, you had to first find worms. So if you're on a farm, you could like turn over boards or something, or you have to either dig or turn over things. If you get lucky, you can get some worms. The first step is to get worms. The sport of digging the bait is nearly equal to that of catching the fish when one's appetite is not too keen, and thus you may have all to yourself today. I would advise you to set in the spade down yonder among the groundnuts, where you see the John's wort waving. I think that I may warrant you one worm to every 3 sods you turn up, if you look well into the roots of the grass, as if you were weeding, or if you choose to go farther, it will not be unwise, for I have found the increase of fair bait to be very nearly as the squares of the distances. He has figured out the square root rule. You know the square rule of squares? Square root rule? Like the quality of your meditation increases to the square root of time. It's an exponential function. The longer you meditate, the advancement increases by the square of time. So, uh, like 6 hours of meditation is equal to about 64 hours of one. Hermit alone. Let me see, where was I? Hermit alone now speaks, somehow. These are a dialogue. Let me see, where was I? Methinks I was nearly in this frame of mind, and the world lay about at this angle. Shall I go to heaven or fishing? Seems like he can't decide if he's going to meditate or go fishing. If I should soon bring this meditation to an end, would another so sweet occasion be likely to offer? I was as near being resolved into the essence of things as ever I was in my life. I fear my thoughts will not come back to me. If it would do any good, I would whistle for them. When they make us an offer, it is wise to say, "We will think of it." My thoughts have left no track. I cannot find the path again. What was it that I was thinking of? It was a very hazy day. I just try these 3 sentences of Confucius. Is Confucius like Confucius? Confucius. They may fetch that state about again. I know not whether it was the dumps or a budding ecstasy. Mem. There never is but one opportunity of a kind. This is a very strange section, dear. I don't know what he's doing here. He's doing like this free-form writing. He's improvising in a sense. Thoreau is improvising. Poet now speaks. How now, hermit? Is it too soon? I have got just 13 old ones, besides several which are imperfect and are undersized, but they will do for the smaller fry. They do not cover up the hooks so much. Those village worms are quite too large. A shiner may make a meal off one without finding the skewer. Hermit. Well then, let's be off. Shall we to the Concord? There's good sport there, if the water be not high. You see how he has multiple voices like I have.
It's another man, David.
Hermit.
And I remember at the beginning,
Hermit.
Somebody from the near the village.
Oh, the neighbor? Yeah, but why does he have hermit and poet?
He is a hermit.
Who is he, hermit or poet?
I don't know which one is the hermit.
Well, anyways, yeah, it could be another man. It could be hermit and poet, but we'll leave it up for interpretation. It could be another man. It's not as... My analysis is very weak, but it's also ad lib. Why do precisely these objects which we behold make a world? Why has man just these species of...
Probably the hermit and the poet is a poet, maybe Emerson.
You mean it could be like him and Emerson? Well, it could be also imaginary. I mean, he's imagining a dialogue. I mean, it's only in, it doesn't have to be exactly like, it's not. Well, anything could be. Why has man just these species of animals for his neighbors, as if nothing but a mouse could have filled this crevice? I suspect that Phil Pay and Co. have put animals to their best use, for they are all beasts of burden, in a sense, made to carry some portion of our thoughts. The mice which haunted my house were not the common ones, which are said to have been introduced into the country by a wild native kind, not found in the village. I sent one to a distinguished naturalist, and it interested him much. When I was building, one of these had its nest underneath the house, and before I had laid the second floor and swept out the shavings, would come out regularly at lunchtime and pick up the crumbs at my feet. It probably had never seen a man before, and it soon became quite familiar and would run over my shoes and up my clothes. It could easily ascend the sides of the room by short impulses like a squirrel, which it resembled in its motions. At length, as I leaned with my elbow on the bench one day, it ran up my clothes and along my sleeve and round the paper which held my dinner, while I kept the latter close and dodged in and played at bo-peep with it, and when at last I held still a piece of cheese between my thumb and finger, it came and nibbled it, sitting in my hand, and afterward cleansed its face and paws like a fly and walked away. Remember how we talked about how flies wipe their hands? So I thought he was going to have his neighbors come, and now we have a mouse. What kind of neighbor is that? He's talking of his animal neighbors. Do we have any animal neighbors? We have squirrels outside, and the cats come by. Cats on the cat on a hot tin roof. A phoebe soon built in my shed, and a robin for protection, and a pine wood grew against the house, In June the partridge, which is so shy a bird, let her brood past my windows from the woods in the rear to the front of my house, clucking and calling to him like a hen, and all her behavior proving himself and the hen of the woods. The young suddenly disperse on your approach, and at a signal from the mother, as if a whirlwind had swept them away, and they so exactly resemble the dried leaves and twigs that many a traveler has placed his feet in the midst of the brood and heard the whir of the old bird as she flew off in her anxious calls, and me wing and seen her trail her wings to attract his attention without suspecting their neighborhood. The parent will sometimes roll and spin round before you in such a dishabille that you cannot, for a few moments, detect what kind of creature it is. The young squat still and flat, and often running their hands under a leaf, and mind only their mother's directions given from a distance, nor will your approach make them run away again and betray themselves. They may even tread on them, or have your eyes on them for a minute without discovering them. I have heard them in my open hand at such a time, and still their only care, obedient to their mother, and their instinct was to squat there without fear or trembling. So perfect is their instinct that once, when I had laid them on the leaves again, and one accidentally fell on its side, it was found that the rest in exactly the same position 10 minutes afterward. They were not callow like the young of most birds, but more perfectly developed and precocious even than chickens. The remarkably adult yet innocent expression of their open and serene eyes is very memorable. All intelligence seems reflected in them. They suggest not merely the purity of infancy, but a wisdom clarified by experience. Such an eye was not born when the bird was, but is coeval with the sky, and it reflects. The woods do not yield another such a gem. The traveler does not often look into such a limpid well. The ignorant or reckless sportsman often shoots the parent at such a time, and leaves these innocents to fall a prey to some prowling beast or bird, or gradually mingle with the decaying leaves which they so much resemble. That's why you shouldn't kill birds, because you might kill all their family. Shouldn't kill anything. If you think you kill more than one, if you kill. It is said that when hatched by a hen, they will directly disperse on some alarm, and so are lost. For they never hear the mother's call which gathers them together. These were my hens and chickens. Hmm. Hmm. It is remarkable how many creatures live wild and free through the secret in the woods, and still sustain themselves in the neighborhood of towns, suspected by hunters only. How to retire the otter manages to live here. He grows to be 4 feet long, as big as a small boy, perhaps without any human being getting a glimpse of him. I formerly saw the raccoon in the woods behind where my house is built, and probably still heard their winnering at night. Commonly I rested an hour or two in the shade at noon after planting, and ate my lunch, and read a little by a spring, which was the source of a swamp and a brook, oozing from under Brister's Hill, half a mile from my field. You think we could go to this spring and read a book in Brister's Hill where he read? We could have our outdoor reading center. What would we read? Mm, you could do a reading. Mm. The approach to this was through a succession of descending grassy hollows full of young pitch pines into a larger wood. About the swamp there is a very secluded and shaded spot under a spreading white pine, There was yet a clean, firm sward to sit on. I had dug out the spring and made a well of clear grey water, where I could dip up a pailful without rolling it, and thither I went for this purpose almost every day in midsummer, when the pond was warmest. Thither, to the woodcock. There's your favorite word, thither. Thither too. Thither too the woodcock led her brood to probe the mud for worms flying but a foot above them down the bank, while they ran in a troop and ate. But at last, spying me, she would leave her young and circle round and round me, nearer and nearer, till within 4 or 5 feet, pretending broken wings and legs to attract my attention, to get off her young, who would already have taken up their march with faint, wiry peeps, single file through the swamp as she directed. For I heard the peep of the young when I could not see the parent bird. There too the turtle dove sat over the spring, or fluttered from bough to bough of the soft white pines over my head, or the red squirrel, coursing down the nearest bough, was particularly familiar and inquisitive. You only need sit still long enough. See if you sit still long enough in some attractive spot in the woods, that all its inhabitants may exhibit themselves to you by turns. You think animals are curious at some point? If you sat still like Buddha under the tree, they would not be threatened by sitting still. Come and bite you. Well, they usually don't even come close to you, so it's quite a while before they come up to you. I don't think they would bite you. Are you afraid they'll bite you? Well, it's only if you bite them, or you want to bite into them. I was witness to events of a less peaceful character one day when I went out to my woodpile, or rather my pile of stumps. I observed 2 large ants, the one red, the other much larger, nearly half an inch long, and black, fiercely contending with one another. Having once got hold, they never let go, but struggled and wrestled and rolled on the chips incessantly. This is like an ant war. My goodness. Looking farther, I was surprised to find that the chips were covered with such combatants. That was not a duel, but a bellum, a war between 2 races of ants. The red always pitted against the black. You know they have war at the ant level. Frequently 2 red ones to 1 black. 2 reds to 1 black. The legions of these myrmidons covered all the hills and vales in my woodyard, and the ground was already strewn with the dead and dying, both red and black. Wow. You think we could learn battle strategy from the ants? I think the military should study ants. We could send ants to Afghanistan, maybe. Should we send like robotic ants? Could build. Don't speculate. Don't speculate. It was the only battle which I have ever witnessed, the only battlefield I ever trod. While the battle was raging, internecine war, the red republicans on the one hand and the black imperialists on the other. On the other side, they were engaged in deadly combat, yet without any noise that I could hear. Human soldiers never fought so resolutely. Do you remember reading this, The Ant War? I don't have total recall. so I don't remember the antler. I watched a couple that were fast locked in each other's embraces in a little sunny valley among the chips. Now at noonday, prepared to fight till the sun went down or life went out. The smaller red champion had fastened himself with the vice to his adversary's front, and through I can throw, and through all the tremblings on that field, never for an instant ceased to gnaw at one of his feelers near the root, having already caused the other to go by the board, while the stronger black one dashed him from side to side, and as I saw on looking near, had always divested him of several of his members. Did you ever sit and watch the ants or play on an ant hill as a child? It's like a little sandbox in a way because they dig up like the earth is like sand. And as a child, ants can be fascinating. I remember observing quite a few ant hills on the farm. I don't know if I saw an ant battle though. They fought with more pertinacity than bulldogs. Neither manifested the least disposition to retreat. It was evident that their battle cry was conquer or die. In the meanwhile, there came along a single red ant on the hillside of this valley, evidently full of excitement, who either had dispatched his foe or had not yet taken part in the battle, probably the latter, for he had lost none of his limbs, whose mother had charged him to return with his shield or upon it. Did the Greek mothers tell the Spartans tell their kids to go to battle and either come back on your shield or upon, return with your shield or upon it? God, what kind of mother would say that? Would you do that as a Spartan mother? You wouldn't say so. Or perchance he was some Achilles who had nourished his wrath apart, and had now come to avenge or rescue his Patroclus. He saw this is quite an amazing story here. The ant battle. The ant battle in Thoreau. He saw this unusual combat from afar, for the blacks were nearly twice the size of the red. He drew near with a rapid pace till he stood on his guard within half an inch of the combatants. Then, watching his opportunity, he sprang upon the black warrior, and commenced his operations near the root of his right foreleg, leaving the foe to select among his own members, and so there were three united for life, as if a new kind of attraction had been invented which put all other locks and cements to shame. I should not have wondered by this time to find that they had their respective musical bands stationed on some eminent ship and playing their national airs the while to excite the slow and cheer the dying combatants. Do you think they had any generals or officers or battle plan or? I think you could learn. And these little red ants had no fear of attacking a big black ant. I think I'm going to have to learn from the ants. They're very persistent. What's the story that the master told about the ant? They had a race or something? The lion, the lion and the ant. Which one was persistent? The turtle? Well, we know the rabbit and the turtle. Oh, the ant. In one story, there's a race, and the one to race their animals, One guy has, like the dog or the lion or the cat or the jaguar or and they're to race the animals. And the one guy puts out he lays a string of sugar all the way from the starting line to the end. And they all take off on their race, and they all get distracted. All the other animals are distracted by something. But the ant follows the string of sugar all the way to the finish line and wins the race. So, apparently ants are superior. I was myself excited somewhat, even as if they had been men. The more you think of it, the less the difference. Certainly there is not the fight recorded in conquered history, at least if in the history of America, that will bear a moment's comparison with this, whether for the numbers engaged in it or for the patriotism and heroism displayed. For the numbers and for carnage, it was an Austerlitz or Dresden conquered fight. 2 killed on the patron side, and Luther Bunchard wounded. Why, here every ant was a buttress. Fire, for God's sake, fire! And thousands shared the fate of Davis and Hosmer. There was not one hireling there, Hireling there. I have no doubt that it was a principle they fought for as much as our ancestry, and not to avoid a threepenny tax on their tea. The result of this battle will be as important and memorable as those whom it concerns as those of the Battle of Bunker Hill, at least. They probably fight out of instinct. I don't think they have a political program. I took up the chip on which the three particularly described were struggling, carried it into my house, and placed it under a tumbler on my windowsill in order to see the issue, holding a microscope to the first mentioned red ant. I saw that, though he was assiduously gnawing at the near foreleg of his enemy, having severed his remaining feeler, his own breast was all torn away, exposing what vitals he had there to the jaws of the black warrior, whose breastplate was apparently too thick for him to pierce, and the dark carbuncles of the sufferer's eyes shone with ferocity such as war only could excite. They struggled half an hour longer under the tumbler, and when I looked again, the black soldier had severed the heads of his foes from their bodies, and the still living heads were hanging on either side of him like ghastly trophies of his saddle-bow, still apparently as firmly fastened as ever, and he was endeavoring with feeble struggles, being without feelers, with only the remnant of a leg. And I know not how many other wounds to divest him of them, which at length, after half an hour more, he accomplished. I can't believe this happened. I raised the glass, and he went off over the window-sill in that crippled state. Do you think anything grows back on him? Whether he finally survived that combat and spent the remainder of his days in some hotel de invalids. Do you think that they have a disability department in the ant house? Would they take him in? I do not know, but I thought that his industry would not be worth much thereafter. I never learned which party was victorious, nor the cause of the war. But I felt for the rest of that day as if I had had my feelings excited and hallowed by witnessing the struggle and the ferocity and carnage of a human battle before my door. I suppose so, in a lot of ways. It's a prototype for human battle. Kirby and Spence tell us that the battles of ants have long been celebrated. This is where he goes to Harvard to look it up. And the date of them recorded, though they say that Huber is the only modern author who appears to have witnessed them. Aeneas Sylvius they quote, after giving a very substantial account of one contested with great obstinacy by a great and small species on the trunk of a pear tree, adds that, quote, this action was fought in the pontificate of Eugenius IV, in the presence of Nicholas Pastorensis, an eminent lawyer, who related the whole story of the battle with the greatest fidelity, unquote. A similar engagement between great and small ants is recorded by Elias Maginus, in which the small ones, being victorious, are said to have buried the bodies of their own soldiers, but left those of their giant enemies a prey to the birds. This event happened previously to the expulsion of the tyrant Christian II from Sweden. The battle which I witnessed took place in the presidency of Pope Polk, 5 years before the passage of Webster's Fugitive Slave Bill. Wow. I think we should stop at the end of the ant battle. Wow. See, I didn't even know that was there, which was proof that I hadn't properly read Walden. Thoreau. I hadn't thoroughly read Thoreau. But now we're doing a more thorough read of Thoreau. Well, that was quite interesting. I'm now curious about ant battles and how I can learn from them. We read from brute neighbors. I guess those are the brutes that I was talking about, sort of that exist within my own reptilian mind. The hermit, the poet, and the ants. I think we'll stop with the ant battle and read on.